I just found it, you have a complete gullibility on my part, a suspension of disbelief, I mean, a massive suspension of disbelief on my part. But I love the mysterious. I love the puzzle. I love a puzzle, a inscrutable puzzle.
DickHeads, like a pink laser beam of truth beaming straight from San Diego, California to your brain hole. We have entered our drug-induced trance, and we're ready to design weapons and talk about the Zap Gun. Today, we have a special guest. We'll get to him in a minute. But I'm David Agronoff, author of Goddamn Killing Machines, Punk Rock Ghost Story, and some other shit. Very excited to be here to talk about the Zap Gun. On the Zoom to my left is Anthony Trevino.
Oh, you introduced me? That's it? I don't get to introduce myself anymore? And stop wagging your finger at me. It's rude. Anthony Trevino, sometimes film critic, and always a snarky asshole, I guess. That's my thing, right? That's what I do here?
That is indeed true. And below Anthony is...
What? Below Anthony?
Yeah, you're below Anthony right now.
Hey.
Maybe on your screen, I'm seeing a completely different setup.
Okay.
But
well, I'm recording.
Anthony is on top of my screen.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So, Langhorne.
J. Tweed.
That's right. All right. Langhorne, you want to say anything about yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can if you want to.
Hi.
Hi, all right. Joining us, our special guest today, Scott R. Jones. Scott,
hello.
Tell the folks who you are and what you do.
Hi, how are you? I'm Scott R. Jones, and I'm a writer. For a while there, for about 5 years, I ran a small press, a boutique press, Martian Migraine Press, and we put out very specific anthologies with themes that took Lovecraft and basically ran with him in interesting directions you wouldn't necessarily suspect. That was my editorial life, but got back into writing a lot more. My first collection came out in early December. Seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's so long. It's another era entirely.
Well, Scott, you're unique as a guest because, first of all, Anthony actually had a Dicklike Suggestion last month,
Okay.
Flies Inc., and it was your book, your novel. So this is the first time that we followed up a Dicklike Suggestion with the author being here.
Oh, thanks. I did not catch that, but yeah, that's Stonefish right there.
That's my favorite book of the year
mirrored.
so far.
It's mirrored. God damn it. Oh well.
Oh, good.
Oh well.
I can see it.
You can see it.
It looked right on my screen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's Stonefish. That came out from Word Horde. Ross Lockhart, of course, the editor and genius behind Word Horde, and he picked the book up, and it came out late February. Again, another era. Such I'm not whining when I say this, but goddamn, what a time to have a book come out.
Yeah. Well,
who knew?
Hey, it reached us, and hopefully soon it will reach more dickheads.
I hope so too. Yeah, it's certainly Phil had an influence on Stonefish. It's cyberpunky with cosmic horror and a lot of sort of psychedelic Gnosticism as its basis. So it gets pretty strange in there.
I would say your representation of an AI is probably Dick's worst nightmare of an AI. It's my favorite.
Lil Dougie.
Yeah, it's great. It's so good.
I feel so sorry for that individual, and I had to do a lot of we all sort of absorb a certain portion of what the popular culture feels about AI. And then when I actually went in to research how these things would work and how they're currently working and how they foresee them working, my God, we're going to have some very interesting entities to interact with in very short order.
Yeah,
is my opinion. I've been trying to teach my kids not just to not be racist, but also basically, does the thing you're interacting with have a nervous system of sorts? Does it process information? Does it put information out into the world? You should probably respect it then. And that just broadens it completely.
Well, I'm very interested in the book. Haven't read it yet. I'll be getting there.
We're going to have coworkers. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, no, I think the book sounds really great. And based on Anthony's recommendation, I definitely want to check it out.
Cool.
So,
thanks, David.
Yeah. But Scott, I'm sure we'll get more details. When did you first read Philip K. Dick? Is he one of your favorites going far back, or is he recent for you?
Yeah, no, I would say it's going far back. I mean, I was reading Philip K. Dick before I knew what was going on with him. Just random paperbacks from the used bookstore. Gosh, I can't even remember what the first. I mean, it was probably Electric Sheep, right? It was probably that.
Besides Anthony, the rest of us all read it. Yeah.
I started the Clans. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I like the. I very much remember from the way back in the day reading the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch and just blown away by that one. But then, of course, it was Valis. Valis is my go-to brain melter with Dick. It's unfortunate because you get to this point where you're like, oh, I understand you. I know what's going on here, and that's kind of horrifying when you understand PKD,
right?
Or at least on some level,
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Valis is. We have a long way to go before we get there.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's definitely one of my favorites of the latter books, and certainly the most autobiographical in many ways, in weird ways. But before we get to the Zap Gun, we do have some segments to get through. We have some PKD news. And the main piece of PKD news is that the Philip K. Dick Award was given for the last year. And it was supposed to be given at NorwestCon in, I believe, Seattle this year. But thanks to everything that is happening, it was given online via live stream. And the book that won is Sarah Pinsker's Sooner or Later Everything Falls into the Sea. And it's a short story collection. But what's really interesting is that when I looked up her books, I realized that I had put one of her books on hold at the library before the library closed. That came out last year. That is a novel that is basically about social distancing and quarantining, and about a band where everyone basically lives online, and it's a novel about this band that tries to bring back live performances. And that came last year. So I'm definitely wanting to read this woman's work, and since we had the Philip K. Dick Award winners on every year, once I'm able to read these books, we'll definitely put an invite out to Sarah to join us and talk about winning.
Sure.
But yeah, so the description according to the awards website is, the description of the short story collection is: a baker's dozen stories gathered turn readers into travelers into the past, future, explorers of the weirder points of the present. Journey is the thing that Pinsker weaves music, memory, technology, history, mystery, love, loss, and multiple selves on generation ships and cruise ships, high seas, murder houses, and tree houses. Sounds pretty good. So that is your winner for the Philip K. Dick Award for this year.
Cool.
Very cool.
I want to read that.
Yeah.
I like short stories, so.
Then the other piece of Philip K. Dick news, it's not directly Philip K. Dick, but another winner of a Philip K. Dick Award is the film Volition, which won the Best in Show for the Philip K. Dick Film Fest. And Volition just sold its distribution rights to Apple TV, Prime Video, and digital platforms. It'll come out on July 10th. So, and that's a story about a man afflicted with some kind of clairvoyance that involves drug dealers and murder, and it won the PKD Film Fest, so it's one I'm looking forward to seeing, and July 10th you'll be able to see it on lots of streaming platforms.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, and Variety had an article about it, and that sounds pretty cool. I'm definitely looking forward to that movie, and I know from people who saw it at the Film Fest just before the world shut down, just a lot of really good praise for that one.
And you said it was called Volition?
Volition.
Volition?
Yeah.
We'll
And
look
if you
for
look
it.
up the PKD Awards, you can see it. Like, there's a short film prize, and there's all kinds of different prizes and we talked about that in our Lies Inc. episode. So you can also go back and listen to Anthony tell me to move on and stop talking about the awards.
So there is one more piece of PKD news, and that's the Blade Runner video game from 1997 that I've been talking about through all of this.
Yes.
Has finally made it. They fixed it. They made it playable, and I think it's available now to
Awesome.
buy and play. So it's an amazing thing. They had to redo all the source code. So
All of it.
all of it.
Is this for all platforms?
I don't know specifically what platforms. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's PC. I don't think it's on any of the consoles yet. But it's a great achievement, not just as a PKD thing, but as a video game thing overall. Because no one's ever done that before, just totally redone source code on a video game. So it was definitely a passion project.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye out for that, and when it happens, you'll definitely play it, Larry.
Oh yeah, I will play it again.
Yeah, and let us know. I do want to take a little bit of time to shout out to Mysterious Galaxies, who just had their, as of the recording of this episode, yesterday was their 27th birthday as a bookstore here in San Diego. And shout out to our boy Rob, who is holding down the fort inside the store, the one employee going in every day. I've talked to him on the phone. He's not well. But we love Mysterious Galaxies and can't wait to be able to have more book events. I went to the last book event there before they closed down. I was at an event there when they announced that the NBA was shutting down their season. And so I got one last social distance book signing with Sylvia Marino Garcia before they shut down. So shout out to Mysterious Galaxies. And then next is the Dicklike Suggestions. And I'd like to start with Larry. What video game do you have for us today? I'm assuming it's a video game, right?
So I've been playing a game, and I'm a mere 350 hours into it. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's really PKD related, but it's called Oxygen Not Included, and it's a game that involves math. It's like a nerd dream come true.
Guaranteed for me to never play it.
Yeah, Excel. You can use Excel spreadsheets.
Now you're starting to make me feel like I'm going to play a video game that simulates work.
Yeah.
No, but it's a game where
it's called Go to Work.
it's a game where you control a bunch of clones who have mistakenly landed underneath a planet, and you have to build up to the surface and try to escape the planet.
That's super dick-like.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Right? Like, and there's not only are you playing the game, but you're finding out that there's a history on the planet of scientists creating these duplicants, which is what they're called. And you find that out by finding ancient relics of like computers and TVs and and vending machines and weird stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so you find memos from this company that built them, and I don't know exactly where it's going because it takes a long time to play this game. But
You know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's got a lot of math involved, so it's not for anyone that doesn't like math.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm out. Tap out with math.
But it's a sort of a god simulator. You know, you control people, you make them do stuff, try to build a society, simulation, that kind of thing. I love it. It's cartoony. Your dupes are stupid. And you have to make sure they don't kill themselves in stupid ways. It's great.
All right, Scott, why don't you go?
Yeah.
next?
Just ask a quick question. You guys can still see me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, there we are. Okay. I'm on my wife's computer. We had some weirdness towards go time. Okay. Yeah, my suggestion, it's the recent outing on Amazon, the Amazon Prime streaming service, Upload. I find to be it has a much lighter, sort of softer sense of humor than PKD, but its subject matter is just fascinating. It basically posits, next week in the future when we have the ability to basically scan our entire brain. Unfortunately, that sort of it's a bit of a spoiler here, but that does tend to kill you. So it's something that gets done basically when you're on death's door, right? You have the option to, instead of dying like a regular person, if you've got the money, if you've got the credits, you can upload. You can have your consciousness uploaded into a virtual environment. And there's all kinds of fun VR tricks with what that is. But then it's watching these regular Joe humans, which is what I like about it. I think that's what I think of PKD about it, is that you have these guys who are just, these characters who are just regular folks, and they're dealing with this incredibly disruptive new technology, which is being trotted out there as like, here is immortality for the species. Here is your reward for a good life. The best years of your life may happen after it's done. with all the funny little ads and the weird little things that BKD always has in his fiction, where he focuses on some pottery, or he focuses on some bizarre little product that nevertheless has this huge impact on people's lives. And it turns out it's also a murder mystery and corporate espionage and all kinds of fun stuff. I recommend it. It's
it's on my list. It's definitely one.
I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Cool. Same guy.
I have an Amazon series as well. Anthony, you don't have anything, right?
All right. Stop me if I've recommended this before. There's this little book called Un-America.
And stop.
Wait, have I already talked about this book like 800 times?
Dude.
All right, there's this other book called Radiant Dawn. Just listen to me. All right.
Stop.
No.
We've had Cody on twice. We've talked about Un-America. Everyone knows. If they haven't bought Un-America yet, I don't know what to tell people, because
Buy Un-America.
It's by Cody Goodfellow. It's a novel by Cody Goodfellow.
It's stunning.
Grab it.
He's a decent writer.
It's stunning.
Yeah, it's a really good book. It was both Anthony and I had it as our top reads of last year. All right, so my Dicklike suggestions. I have 3, and Anthony, fuck off. So one, I'm just going to say really quickly, which is this Amazon show. Fuck off. Is this Amazon show Tales from the Loop, and it's a very kind of art house sci-fi, very weird, very slow, very morose show, so it's not for everybody. But
I like I only watched the first one, but it was decent.
Oh,
I mean, it was really slow.
Yeah, you have to have patience with it, but I'm 5 episodes in, and it's really good. There's some artist, I don't remember his name, who have these like weird drawings, and they're the basis of the show. Is that they use these drawings as kind of a
Inspiration
starting
for the
point.
pieces, yeah.
Yeah, and the first episode is directed by Mark. I think his name is Roanoke, the guy who did
Hamill.
One Photo.
Singer.
Huh?
No?
No,
Mark Hamill? Not Mark Singer?
It's not Mark Singer. It's not the Beastmaster.
All right.
But
One can
the
hope.
guy who directed 1 Hour Photo, and he directed the pilot. Jodie Foster directed one of the episodes, and
No
it's a
kidding.
really good show.
Good Robin Williams performance that no one brings up is 1 Hour Photo. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love 1 Hour Photo. And it's one of the times where I've had the most uncomfortable, where my wife and I laughed in the theater and no one else laughed, when he made the joke about having gonorrhea to the little kid.
And Jodie Foster's episode of Black Mirror was pretty good. I like the Archangel.
Yeah, it was, and I have not seen her episode of Tales from the Loop yet, but I highly recommend Tales from the Loop. And then I have a little cross-media for the next one, which is, I just finished reading last week, Stanislaw Lem,
Yeah.
Sociological Congress. This is, if you've only read like Solaris by Lem, which is the one most people have read, this is way more Kurt Vonnegut-ish, more
Really?
Zap Gunny. It's very sarcastic and funny, and it's about a guy who goes to a conference of futurologists, but it gets really fucking wacky. There's time travel. There's people being frozen. There's all kinds of weird shit, but it's very much a statement on like climate change and population and all kinds of things. It's really fucking good. There was also, in 2013, there was sort of a movie based on it called The Congress, starring Robin Wright.
I don't know that.
Playing herself, the woman from Princess Bride, where she replaces the Russian cosmonaut from Lem's novel, and they send her to the conference, and it's similar to Upload, where in the movie they're digitizing actors, and they come to her and say, we want to turn you into a digital actor so Robin Wright will live forever. And once they digitize her, the movie becomes animated.
Woo!
And completely insane. It's not for everyone.
Well, maybe I have heard of this.
Yeah, John Hamm's in it, Harvey Keitel, and it's really fucking wacky. It's not for everyone. It is definitely fucking weird. It's not exactly an adaptation of the novel. It just takes place at a futurological congress, but it's like he has some of the ideas, and it parallels the novel, but it's very different. You know, it's very different from going from a Russian cosmonaut to the star of Princess Bride and Forrest Gump.
The real question is, do we see Harvey Keitel's junk? Because that's all that
If you see
matters.
Harvey Keitel's junk, you're going to have to give me another recommendation for that.
Do you think he
There's so
refers to
many.
his junk as the Bad Lieutenant?
Bad Lieutenant, the piano. What else do you need?
What the fuck?
Probably.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Harvey Keitel junk out there.
Yeah, right.
And last is a book called China Mountain Zhang. And this is, of all the books that I've read in quarantine that have to do with the times that we're living in, this one is sneaky about the times we're living in. I know a lot of people are pointing to The Naked Sun by Isaac Asimov because it's a novel about a planet that's all social distanced and there's a murder. Yeah, that's kind of on the nose. The Stand is way on the nose, and it's 99% death rate in The Stand. But China Mountain Zhang is about a second American Depression that leads to a revolution, and it's about the Chinese century, which is a thing we hear a lot about now, is that this is the Chinese century. The thing is, this cyberpunk novel was written in 1992. Okay? by Maureen McHugh, and it was nominated for all the awards. I'm not sure how many it won. It won the Tiptree, I think. Yeah. And anyways, it's fucking great. It's like a slice of life. There's not a lot of plot to it, so that's kind of PKD-ish in a sense.
In a sense.
In a sense, for some of his stuff. It's more just very much like slices of life in this Chinese century. And I thought it was incredible, and one of the best books I've read this year so far. So that's China Mountain Zhang by Maureen McHugh from 1992. And that's it for the Dicklike Suggestions. So now, Zap Gun came out in 1967.
David, what was happening in 19 and 6 and 7?
Well, in 1967 was the Green Bay Packers played the Kansas City Chiefs in the first Super Bowl, Super Bowl I. Just to give you how much time has passed, we've already had Super Bowl 50. So we're definitely a long ways out from the Zap Gun. Also, the 6-Day War when the Arab forces attacked Israel, otherwise known as the Yom Kippur War.
Mm-hmm.
And Gus Grissom and the crew of Apollo 1 died on the launch pad. They didn't even make it off the ground in Apollo 1.
They exploded.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did not. Indiana's own Gus Grissom did not do well on Apollo
That
1.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have any Gus Grissom news either because he's also dead. But yeah, that's 1967. And but the writing and publication history of the Zap Gun started much earlier. As many Philip K. Dick books do, there's a long period between the original writing and conception of all of this. And by the time it came out in 1967, 5 years had passed since he was first suggested the idea. And how this one started, and this one's different, is that Pyramid, who published the book, contacted the SMLA agency, the Scott Meredith agency, and asked if they had any science fiction authors who would be willing to write a book called The Zap Gun.
Pew pew.
And so, pew pew. So a letter came to our boy Philly. It said, and I quote, "I'm happy to report that we have a novel assignment for you from Pyramid Books. We had a meeting with Don Benson, the editor over there, and he has an idea for a science fiction novel entitled The Zap Gun. Of course, you'll recognize The Zap Gun as the old Buck Rogers standby. Don wants to do a book that would be somewhat tongue-in-cheek about the serious possibility of a real blaster. Real blaster. Blaster seems much more a possibility today because of the experiments with the laser beam." This is
Lasers.
Wow.
Yep.
That's kind of lovely.
Yeah, it's the letter goes on to say, Don has agreed to... Now, wait, before I go on, can you imagine at this point, Phil's reading the letter and he's like, whatever, this is really stupid, I'm probably not going to do this. Then comes the next part. Don has agreed to contract on the basis of a detailed outline from you and will pay an advance of $1,500. $500 on signature of contract, $500 on completion, and $500 on publication. I hope this idea interests you, and I'll look forward to an outline from you shortly.
I want someone to pay me $1,500 for an outline. I'll just
Right?
do it all day long. I'll just write outlines.
$500 for the
Does
outline.
that,
Still,
does that
yeah,
outline exist?
I have.
Do we know if that outline exists? Because I would love.
I sent you the outline.
Yeah, it does.
Probably didn't
Oh, it
read
does?
I read the first 2 pages. Thank
Okay.
you. And then I said, when's the laser gun show up? And I stopped reading.
Yes, I sent all of you the outline.
Yeah.
Thanks to...
I don't read anything you send me.
Yeah. Zach Wood's friend of the podcast, had a PDF of it and sent me a copy.
Nice.
So yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the outline has nothing to do with the completed book.
Zero to do with it.
Nope.
Yeah, it's much more of a time travel story. I mean, a little bit with the veteran time traveler guy.
Time travel.
A little bit, but not really. Yeah, very, very small amount. But the outline, one thing that I think would be really interesting, and I don't know, I mean, the PKD estate would have to agree to this, but it would be interesting to see somebody like actually try to write a novel based on that outline or adapt it for film, as you know, because I actually thought you didn't. Yeah, Anthony. You're telling me no on this. I don't know. I thought it sounded.
No.
It sounded like it could have been interesting, but yeah, I'll have to jump out of my notes for a little bit to look at that in a little bit. But so the manuscript for the Zap Gun came to the SMLA agency on April 15th, 1964. So he wrote most of this in 1963 or early 64, and we know that he was writing this almost concurrently with The Penultimate Truth, that he may have been writing back and forth on these two books, which is interesting because they're both Cold War books, you know.
But they're both pretty different, so that's kind of impressive.
Yeah, and the next book he wrote after this was Clans of the Alphane Moon, which he actually did, I believe, actually ended up at the agency before. But he sent Clans of the Alphane Moon to his agency before he sent the Zap Gun, but Zap Gun was finished first. I don't know why he waited. I don't know if he thought he was going to do another draft or something, but the Clans arrived at SMLA in January, and Zap Gun arrived in April. So, but Anthony, do you have your notes up?
I do.
Yeah, we have only 2 quotes directly from Phil on the Zap Gun.
Or do you want me to? Do you want me to read them both, or
read the first one first?
Sure. The intent is not sufficient to guarantee a good result. Some of the worst books I've written, like the Zap Gun, are books I've labored over. I wouldn't call this one of his worst books by a long shot.
No. Not by no.
Not when I have read the Cosmic Puppets. Okay.
This is definitely not. And he considers it one of his worst. But you know, the other thing with PKD, and I'm sure many of us feel this way about our own work sometimes, is that you may one day say, like, oh god, that's the worst fucking thing I ever wrote, and then like feel better about it, because he has he did say one other time he listed it, he said Penultimate Truth, he said something up to the effect of Penultimate Truth and Zap Gun are books which deserve to survive World War III. So you know, we've said this many times before. Tessa talked about it with you, Anthony. You can't always trust the things that you hear out of Philip K. Dick's mouth.
Yeah.
Because from one day to the other, they change. But there's one other quote that's a little bit longer. Anthony?
A lot of them are pot boilers. Well, they weren't intentionally. They just worked out that way. I always write it as well as I can, but sometimes I just don't have the sacred fire to inflame my talent into. You know, a level of genius, and what I wind up with is some turkey like Zap Gun. The first half is totally unreadable. I don't know where or what. I can hardly reconstruct the thinking that underlay the first half of that book. Just totally unintelligible. I'm going to kind of agree with Dick on this one, but I'll get into that, why I feel that way later.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Hold
on, we can't.
Really picked up until the movement to Iceland, you know, until I made it
starts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when he meets Lilo in the. Sorry.
yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that, but
No, I think the book starts. The book starts when they're like, "You two need to smash your brains together." That for me is when the book starts.
All right, well, we'll get to reviewing the text when we get out of publication history. I think we should talk about the outline a little bit. I'm not going to read, obviously, the whole thing. It's 8 pages long, but I do want to.
Well, you would see my live stream dying of boredom if you did. So,
like an airplane, you'd be hanging yourself.
no, my heart would literally stop.
So
Go on, David.
the outline for the Zap Gun takes place in the far future of the year 1987.
Woo!
Wow, I was 1 year old.
And another great PKD name that we can add to the list that never made it out of the outline is Donald Hedgegrow, who is a HAB plan writer, good at it, making top income, known throughout Terra. There are no HAB plan magazines. All major publications print such stories. There's a planet-wide interest in the later-day development of science fiction. So one thing that's interesting about the outline for Zap Gun is that, much like how the comic books influence the weapons in the final book, in the outline, it's a kind of a commentary on science fiction, and the main character is a science fiction writer in a kind of Vonnegut way, which we don't see Dick do very often at this point in his career. But there's time travel, there's a war. I mean, it's an interesting piece, and I definitely think a lot of it, there's a time traveler from the year 2040, and then there's a whole thing about, like, no, he's really from way further in the future. And so there's like twists and turns about where the characters are coming from. There's a war, there's weapons.
So it has a lot of the penultimate truth in it, then. Sort of.
It sounds a little bit like Dr. Futurity, too.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's also true.
Yeah, and so I do think that the outline is very interesting, and personally I think that, you know, depending upon what drugs he was doing at the moment, it might have been a good novel. But was he writing it in the hovel or not? I don't know. But I think that there's interesting ideas, and I think that the outline is definitely worth reading. So if you get, it was in the PKD Society newsletter number 16. That's where we got it. And there's also thoughts from Roger Zelazny in it. So if you want to read that too. But yeah, I think, you know, that's the interesting thing, is that he did not stick with the outline at all. He ended up writing something completely different, and I think that's very interesting. Now,
Well, I mean, have we talked about it? Dick's a pantser, isn't he?
Yeah, he's mostly a pantser. Yeah. I think so, but I'm not entirely sure, which, you know.
Yeah, I don't know if he does a whole lot of outlining. I think he did the outline this time because they asked him to do it. They said, we'll give you money for it. Yeah, they paid him for it. So. Yeah.
And seriously, I would be a very wealthy man if I got paid for my outlines, because I, like, have a box that's just full of outlines. But most of which I've never written. So one thing that's interesting is that we may have just as well talked about what happened in the year 1965 and 66, because a shorter version of this novel was originally published as Project Plowshare.
Terrible title.
That was the title. In Worlds of Tomorrow, a magazine, in December of 65 and January of 66. This shortened version, I did manage to get a PDF of Worlds of Tomorrow from Jesse at SFF Audio. Shout out to Jesse. And I looked over it a little bit, but I didn't have the patience to see what was different because it was most of the novel was there. But I will say that one thing that's interesting about him titling it Project Plowshare Well, one thing that I find really interesting is he was hired to write this book, The Zap Gun, by Pyramid Books. He got paid for the outline, and then he went and published it elsewhere with a different... Well, I don't think he intended this. What I'm saying is, what I think happened here is he wanted to do a novel called Project Plowshare. He wrote all of this as Project Plowshare, and I think he added in lines about the Zap Gun in order to complete the contract with Pyramid 2 years later.
Right.
And that is the difference.
Totally not associated, but
Right. And so there's 2 or 3 instances in the book where I highlighted where he actually had them say Zap Gun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that it's called Zap Gun or that those lines were in there was entirely to get that $1,000 upon completion and publication. And we know that not too soon before that, when he wrote The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldridge, he couldn't get his driver's license renewed until he paid off his parking tickets. So we know Phil needed money during this period, so I'm sure he was more than willing. I'm not sure where we were at. Do you have the timeline up, Larry? Do you know where we were at in Divorcepedia?
Divorcepedia? I can bring it up real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, what are you talking about? 67?
Yeah.
He married Nancy in 66.
Oh, so we were happy Phil with Nancy here.
Which is why he's only writing about 18-year-olds. So.
Yeah. This was happy married Phil with Nancy. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. Yeah, that's why we look at the timeline, guys.
Yeah, that's why we have Dick's Divorcepedia. It's fine.
Yeah, so, and I definitely, again, on the outline, I want to give a shout out to Zach Woods, Eric Jennings, and also to a listener, Michael
Academy
from Indiana, who hooked us up with a PDF of the Kim Stanley Robinson's book on Philip K. Dick, which is out.
Have you been reading that?
I have been reading it, and I'll have quotes from it coming up here soon.
Oh.
Yeah, I haven't read it cover to cover, but I read parts to do with the books that were.
Well, I mean, just between us, is it good?
Just between
us and everybody listening.
And everyone listening.
Yeah.
It's really good.
All right.
But not a shocker, considering Kim Stanley Robinson is
considering the source.
Yeah. And for those of you, I know on the thread about the Kim Stanley Robinson's book, I got hammered by somebody for saying that Aurora was one of the best science fiction novels of the 21st century, and this person told me that Phil would hate it, and I was like, I don't care. What Phil would have done about it.
How's that a criteria for me?
I know. I was like, I don't care. Anyways, that's besides the point. But yeah, shout out to our listeners who have been hooking us up with materials that we don't have. That has been a resource that I really love the fact that we have been able to call on our listeners to,
we appreciate it.
To help us out with materials. That's been really, really, really helpful. But especially Zach Woods, he's the real MVP because he's sent me.
But everyone is equal. They're all great.
No, Zach sent me his FBI files, so Zach gets.
Fine, Zach's better than everyone else.
And you haven't shared them with us yet?
I shared them with Larry. I did.
Did you?
Fuck you, man.
Well, no, I shared them with Larry because that file has a bunch of audio interviews that he can cut together for intros.
Mm-hmm.
That's why.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you should look at the emails.
Every once in a while, I should pay attention.
Yeah, you should.
You shared them with him. He didn't even care.
All right, so that's it for the publication history of the Zap Gun. It was printed by Pyramid, and it didn't. I'm not sure that it ever got reprinted. I think Berkeley, when Russell Galen was like in the late 70s, when he was helping Phil get his back catalog in, I think is when it got back into print. But I'm not entirely certain on that. That's it for the writing and publication history. Langhorne, it's time.
For what?
You know what it's time for. Are you ready?
Story breakdown.
Oh, that. Bing, bing.
I did just hear that, right? Story breakdown?
Yes.
Yes.
Story break. Let's break it down.
Let's break it down, Langhorne. Tell us what happened. Larry, give us the tell us what's happening while I
All right.
sneak off and pee.
Yeah, whatever. All right, so this is the best part because they both go and piss while I'm trying to tell a story.
I'm still here. David's gone, so just get on with it so he doesn't bore everybody to tears again.
All right, so the Zap Gun begins with our boy Lars talking about how he's a fraud and how everything sucks, and if he fails, they're going to kill him, and how he hates the general, whatever his name is, ass clown.
Nix.
General Nitz.
Nix. Nits? Nits or Nix?
I think it's Nitz. It's Nitz.
Yeah.
N-I-T-Z. Yep.
This is definitely the best of the PKD names. This
Yeah.
book.
There's so many odd names in this.
Lars Powder Dry.
It's pretty hard to beat.
All right. Fuck. What does happen in this?
That's
first
like
episode?
having a John Woo movie with a character named like John Two Gun. John Two Gun Shooter.
God, I really don't remember what happens in the first half of this book.
Because it doesn't matter because the
Not a
book
lot.
starts later. It's 60 pages of, okay, uh-huh, who
Yes,
cares?
No, there's good stuff. There's
He goes about his daily business of running his job as the what are the he's
fashion
the
designer.
He's the sole
Weapon.
proprietor of a weapons fashion design
he's the
boutique.
weapons fashion designer for
Yeah.
the entire hemisphere, or I don't know quite how they have it separated, but I think it's by hemisphere. So the country
East and
or the
West.
world is divided into two blocks. There's the West block, and then there's the meat.
Peep East.
Yeah. So there's the Eastern Bloc and there's the Western Bloc, and they had there was a war. This is what was decided. These two are the world, and it blah blah blah. There's some other countries, but they don't ever play into anything. And so our boy is doing his thing. He's talking to his buddies. He's kind of in control, which is odd for a PKD character right away. He doesn't start with, fuck, my life is terrible. He does say, oh shit, I'm kind of a fraud. But then he's like, all right, this sucks. Let's do our thing. Fucking, you go over here. Give me my shot. Let's do this fucking thing and get out of here. I gotta go fuck my girl in France. And so that's basically how the first 20 pages or so go.
Do we
And
get
then he
any?
goes-
Do we get any insight into what the actual job is?
No.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No,
That
it's
It comes a bit later, but you get some insights into
But
what
we
it might be.
we
but
really
it's
don't
vague.
get. We're told he supposedly goes to some other realm and comes back and draws things. But other than that, it's very vague. It's very much a question that's hanging in the air.
Do we ever get a scene where he's actually in a trance and we kind of
Yes.
feel
I
like
have notes on that later.
Because I feel like I missed a part of the book.
No, we don't really get the trance in him drawing.
Okay, yeah, I didn't
get-
think so.
We get the results at the back end.
Yeah, we get.
Mhm.
He
we
goes
get
into trance.
and then and everything else is a blackout, basically. So that's all we're told
Okay.
throughout the whole thing, except for that one final thing. All right, so our guy goes to France. His girlfriend turns out to be smarter than pretty much everyone else, and her name is Marin Fane, and she runs his Paris office. He has a New York office and a Paris office, and not only is she his mistress, does he have a wife?
No.
No, I was
Oddly,
shocked that
so-called
he did.
so-called mistress, I guess it's the sign of the times. And so she's like, dude, you're broken. And there's no way really to fix you. And he's like, yeah. And he's really worried about this, the East Block version of him. And he's also kind of turned on by her. Because he's never seen her, but he knows she does the same job he does. And yet he's intimidated, but for some reason that makes him kind of horny. And no, he's like, I gotta meet this person and figure out what's going on. And his mistress is like, yeah, you want to meet her and bang her. That's all you want. You just want to dip your wick. That, you fucking psycho. And then a robot he invented is like, yeah, she's right. You're a fucking psycho.
Old Orville. Old Orville.
It's like a magic 8-ball with
It's
a
a
guy.
Yeah, with
Like
something
that-
like, I think, I
questions. The little thing they had in the mid '90s.
yeah.
Ask it yes or no questions, and it says, "I'm a rock," and you were like, "Oh my god, I was totally thinking of a rock." And so,
But Lars asks some complex questions of the device, and it really has to dig deep to get some answers,
it
because
does, but
normally
it
it's
kind of fucks
yeah,
with
it's
it
just
at the same time. It's
true. Yeah, messes with him.
It's not just an AI. He's like an AI that can fuck with you, which is great. One of my favorite characters, by the way. Horrible. So after that, he comes up with this plan where he's going to go to he's going to go meet with this guy that he had a confrontation with earlier, this Russian agent who is at the Russian consul, and he's going to go say, hey, dude, if I can get some pictures of this girl, I'll give you the information you wanted earlier. And the guy turns out to be like not really interested, says, yeah, you'll probably meet the girl, but hey, you're going to get killed because there's satellites from aliens now. And we're all doomed, but see this gun? It's for you. And
It's
you should kill you.
Slavers from Sirius.
I should mention there's also an agency called Cush, Cash. What is it
Catch.
Catch.
I was reading his catch, but yeah.
Yeah, Catch.
Larry, is it run by ZZ Top?
Maybe. You don't know. So Catch is a sort of a freelance spy agency, and they work both sides of the fence, and they kind of pass information. So they give our boy a terrible picture of his crush, where he can't make out her true form because she's blurred out, but he's still like, kind of, I don't know, that blur, kind of sexy. So, as I said, there's satellites. The satellites turn out to be this big danger. All of a sudden, they keep popping up. By the third satellite, they start entrapping cities and making it so we can't see the city itself, and we don't know what's happening in there. We, of course, come to the correct conclusion that it's slavers from some alien planet. And
Chitinous slavers.
Chitness.
Chitinous. They got chitin. They're crabs.
So then the governments come up with this plan where they're going to get these two sort of psychic weapons designers together, come up with the ultimate weapon. On the way to meet the other weapons designer named Lilo, Topchev, he picks up, our boy picks up a comic book by chance that is the best comic book. I want to read this comic book. It's called the Blue Hero of Space and
The
Time.
blue cephalopod man from Triton.
From Triton.
Yep.
Thank you. And the blue cephalopod man from Triton has
Titan.
all these misadventures, and he uses all these crazy weapons that turns out to be where our heroes are getting their little drawings from. They're not original drawings. They're from this dude. But that happens later. Anyway, so the fucking guy, he goes to Iceland. That's the meeting spot, with his comic book in his back pocket. He doesn't care anything at all about what's going on. The world's doomed. We're all going to be slaves to chitinous fuck faces. And what he does is he just goes to the door, meets the girl. She's like a 17, 18-year-old, slight little immature thing. And he's like, I'm in love. I'm in love with this little girl. And that's all that matters to me. Who fuck the world and everything. I got to get me some of that. And
yeah, that's what
and
happens.
they're like, she's like, oh, it's great to meet you. Will you take these pills? And he's like, fuck yeah, baby, I'll take your pills. So he takes the pills and dies. Not the end of the story. Luckily, it's the East Block, so there's cameras everywhere. They come in, save him, and they're like, oh, it might have been an accident. And then everyone's like, come on, look at her face. She's like, I fucking tried to kill him. What? I don't care. So she's a bitch. And but in an immature way, so I wouldn't blame her for being a bitch. And she's had a shitty life, so I give her a pass. You give her a pass, Anthony?
I'm gonna give her a pass, but I'm gonna stop you for a second, only because I think she's a little freaked out after they bring him back to life. Like I don't think she has a kind of a blasé attitude about it. I think she's like, oh shit, what did I do? I think she's a little bit more kind of freaked out by the fact.
The reason she tried to kill him is kind of fucked up.
I wouldn't argue that. What's up, Scott?
What was her reason for trying to kill him again? It was basically to arrange for her own safety within the confines of PPs. So it's not like she was deliberately hostile to him.
Suicide.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That happened.
The whole reason for killing him was so Marin wouldn't commit suicide. Because that was her vision.
There it is.
I mean, again, save the earth. This woman commits suicide. Who knows? Anyway. So, yeah, I'll give you half that, Anthony. You know, she was freaked out, but
I'll take half credit.
She tried to play it off. So they end up mind melding, and they come up with an old water engine or steam engine.
Donkey engine.
A donkey steam engine.
Or logging.
And here's where the story actually starts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically they find out that they've been copying this comic book and that they haven't been doing anything for their entire career. They're not just frauds. They're frauds of the worst kind. So, again, then they go back and they're ready to get killed. They try to escape, but then they're saved by Dr. Death or Dr. Dead, who's like, all right, let's get the FBI in here, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't fucking matter. And then they get back to the U.S., and Marin shoots herself in the face. I think she meant to shoot herself in the face, but she used exploding tip bullets, which the great thing about them is they're not just exploding tip bullets. It's that when they explode, the shrapnel also explodes. So it's like a double exploding tip. She fucks herself up and dies 6 hours later. And then our boy goes into some kind of comatose state, ends up in Seattle. He gets there 24 hours later, wakes up, calls, and says, "So what's going on?" He says, "Your buddy Pete is back in Washington trying to solve the problems, and you should come back here." So he goes back there. There's this old man who Lars thinks is an android, but says that he had come back from. But the old man says he has come back from the future, but he's senile, so he can't really convey information. All he has is this one story he constantly repeats about how he was in the war and he was one of the main guys who ran the
TWG.
The time warping gun.
It's a time warpage generator, I believe.
Warpage generator.
All right.
Time warpage generator. I've got it written down.
Time warpage generator.
And
So
a list of all the weapons.
when it exploded, when the gun finally crapped out, it exploded, sent him to the past. That's the story he has. And I swear to God, I am not mentioning Thebs. Fuck that guy. All right, so
That's an awkward part of the storyline. It really felt sort of tacked on.
all right, I'll mention Febs for 5 seconds. Febs is great. I think that's a great character. I think that's a great short story. Has no place in this fucking book whatsoever. It's just there to pad the pages. So I'm kind of offended by it, but I enjoyed the story. All right, so
Wait, I forget. Is Febs the one that's peddling the game?
no, Febs is the evil one who becomes a concomitant and
Oh, at the very end, and then he's like, "What's in this box?" And he kills everybody in the room.
kills everyone. Yeah.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. All right.
Yeah. All right. So where was I? So Lars gets back to Washington, D.C., and he says, this guy's an android. They test him. He's not an android. And then he's like, all right, so we're going to have to go deep under and try to figure out what's going on with this dude, because if we go into our trance state while we're in the same room with the guy and no one else is around in a certain perimeter, we will catch his thoughts. How they came to that conclusion or how they figured that out or how that works, fuck it, doesn't matter. So him and Lilo, they go deep into their trance state, and it turns out that this old man is this toy maker, Klug, who he had met earlier once. And Klug turns out to be our hero. He has all the answers. He's not just the guy with the answers. He's the guy that invented the thing that's going to save us from the Chitness aliens. So Klug, who had been treated like shit, frankly, earlier in the book.
Oh yeah, they dismiss him like crazy.
Yeah. He's the old man. And this is the only time we see inside the visions. Lars sees Klug in the vision as the old man, but the old man can speak and says, I can't really tell you anything because the way the time shift works is that if I break this barrier of time, it'll fuck me up a lot. It'll send me into this loop of this basically hell loop of being stuck in time and blah, blah, blah. And so he can't reveal anything, but he can hint at what's going on and how to beat the aliens. So he gives hints, and by the time Lars wakes up, he has just written one sentence that says, "The man in the maze." So that's the hint he needed. He knew he had to find a toy that Klug had made. They find the toy that turns out to be an empathy machine, which is an elegant solution to war. An empathy machine. They mass produce this empathy machine. They send it to the people, not the soldiers, but the people of is it Titan? No, it's Sirius. They send this to the Chitness people of Sirius. They all learn empathy, and they consider humans, instead of being worthy of enslavement, they consider them to be cute little pets, and they leave us alone.
They're really into our thumbs.
Yeah, they like the thumb. They thought it was a little anomaly. And everyone lives happily ever after in a traditional story. But in this story, we have 25 more pages of junk. So
I'm not gonna lie, dude. I got to what I thought was the end and went, there's 25 more pages left.
Yeah.
I'm just ignoring that
happened.
yeah, the book ended where it was supposed to in my mind, and that was a great book, and
So Lars
5 pages didn't bother.
Lars wakes up I don't know if it's a couple days or a couple weeks after, but life is starting to return to normal. Lars wakes up next to his teen bride, and he goes to make breakfast, get some coffee. She wakes up and she's like, "Hey, what are you thinking about?" And he was like, "I was thinking about Marin, and then I was thinking, like, I'd really like to see her even though she's dead. So I'm going to kill myself. Is that cool?" And she's like...
And she's like, at first she's like, yeah, that's fine.
Then she's...
That makes a kind of sense, she says.
She is.
Yeah.
She's like, well, I'm going to go back to the East, see if they're cool with me now, like change some of the rules, make my life a little easier. And here's some pills. Go knock yourself out. And so then he's getting ready to do it. He pops the pills in his mouth, and she's like, well, maybe I'll stay. Maybe I'll do your Paris office or whatever. Whatever. And so he spits out the pills, and they live happily ever after.
But it doesn't end there.
No, because
There's still more.
we still have 15 pages of Febs. Well, Surly G. Febs.
Another great name.
Who is so pissed off that he hasn't gotten his place on Earth that he gets all of his concomitant buddies together. There's 6 of them in total, including him. He's having this private meeting. He ends up killing them all, making this weapon, getting ready to go and get his place on Earth. Loses his fucking mind when they force empathy on him.
Yeah, they deliver it in a little package.
Empathy in a little package.
Here's your game. Enjoy. What is this thing? How do I make it work? How can I make that little furry thing inside the maze feel better about his situation?
Right.
It just devolves into mental illness for him.
Ruins his mind.
Yeah.
And then we have a short scene with one of the catch agents, someone we've met earlier, getting a package. And since I really just skimmed the last 23 pages or whatever it is, I'm not sure what that package is. Does anyone
It's the
know?
maze again.
It's the maze again.
It's the maze again. Okay. They're being sent out as like preemptive hits on unempathetic warmongers.
Yeah. It's the Dick equivalent of turning your car on and it exploding. They got really casinoed.
Yeah. I think it should be mentioned too that the I don't think it was. If it was, my apologies. But the weapons that these psychics design, or that they pull from the hyperdimensional weapon realm, right? It's supposed to be this higher dimensional realm where there's these platonic ideals of weapons.
Yeah.
They go in there and see it while they're in trance, and they produce a trance sketch, and then it goes through this whole production. But what they do is they're not actually functional weapons. They only look functional. They only seem functional. And both governments, both hemispheres, basically work on these false. What would you call it? Yeah, basically.
Talk about that because that gets into the grander theme.
So weird.
Yeah.
Yep.
That gets into the grander theme of the Zap Gun and what Dick was trying to do here.
We'll definitely talk about all that stuff.
Cold War. This is a satire of the Cold War.
Totally.
If you factor in that it was originally kind of put together or written in 1963, you have the East and the West showdown basically had just happened over Cuba, and you have the East and West powers in Russia and the U.S., the two superpowers with tons of nukes that they're basically never going to use or they can't use, and if they do use them, then we're all dead, right? So I think the analogy and the theme that Dick is trying to do here in a satire way, that you have these, what he calls fashion weapon designers, right? I mean, he's just, by calling it fashion, he's basically saying, like, this is all for show. These weapons are just for show. They don't really matter. and there is some offensive stuff in there that we'll get to when we get to the offensive bits. Oh, come on, dude. Page 4.
Yep.
And he talks about, since I mentioned it.
Is that where he drops that N-bomb, David?
That's another part.
David's like, no, it's page 5.
Miserable counterparts in the world of clothing, they like women.
Yeah.
His predecessor, Wade, had been heterosexual too, had in fact killed himself over color Tura of Dresden, blah, blah. Anyways, but basically it's completely heterosexist and awful. So
fashion is a shit show.
Yeah, but
in real life, fashion is a shit show.
Fashion is a shit show. But basically, we're getting sidetracked. The Cold War thing is very much what the theme of this novel is, and I think when you get into ideas with plot and things, and one of the reasons why I don't care about the 25 pages at the end that really don't matter is that one of the reasons they don't matter is they don't thematically tie in.
This is why you like Tarantino.
Mm.
Well, that's true. I do like Tarantino. But what I think the Zap Gun is trying to do is just to really send home a message about using science fiction to send a message about the Cold War. And if you factor in the idea that he was hired by Pyramid Books to write a Pew Pew book, right? It's fucking hilarious that this is the book that he turned in, right?
Yeah.
That it's a book about where characters design weapons and they're called fashion designers because the weapons are just show, they're fashion. And that's a really, I think, a really great way of using science fiction to make the point. And it makes this a deeper novel than I think sometimes people give it credit for. And I think this is Dick playing in an almost Vonnegut level of satire through the majority of the book.
I think it's a little on the nose to be Vonnegut.
Yeah, well, I mean, Vonnegut can be a little on the nose too sometimes too. Slaughterhouse-Five is pretty on the nose.
Really?
With the bombing of Dresden?
No, it's a counterpoint. It's totally different. That's not a. I mean,
well,
Dick says nuclear weapons suck. He actually says it.
Yeah. I've got it noted here somewhere.
Yeah. There is some interesting stuff with that, but I think one of the things that's, for me, and I did make a list of the weapons that they designed in these drug-induced trances, and they're pretty fucking hilarious.
The evolution gun.
There's the evolution gun that devolves people.
Into like protoplasm, right?
Yes. Turns you back to
devolves them
protoplasm.
so much they end up just a pile of amino acids.
Right. There's the psychic bestower gun. I think that just makes you psychic. One of my personal favorites, and we can go deeper on this if we need to, because I have the page, is the sheep dip isolator, which makes you think that you're like in the middle of a factory farm because it's so bad that you want to leave town.
Okay.
That was an absolutely fun one because the weapon itself embeds itself in the surfaces of things,
right,
in between the molecules, so you will never get the stench out.
Can't get it. Yeah.
Once you've hit a city with the sheep dip isolator, it will be unlivable for the rest of time.
Yes.
You know, it's like talk about your non-lethal ordnance, but very effective.
And
not actually a real thing, though. That's the thing, right?
Right. And
but all these are fake weapons.
This is
all from comic books.
The next weapon is the Civic Notification Distorter, which ruins your paperwork.
Yeah.
And only manages to save half of your paperwork in case of annihilation. And therefore, it just disrupts everything. There's the lobotomy gas. And then the Time War page generator. So those are all the weapons that I.
Is that the Xerox one? Which one's the Xerox one?
That's
one where
the civic notification distorter, I believe.
Not the one where if you try to copy something, it'll make mistakes, and then if you copy off the copy, it will be.
Yes, that's the civic notification distorter. And
then the noise one. What was that one called?
Oh, I don't know if I have that one.
Remember the one that rains down little gum wrapper?
It rains down the little pellets, which you can't find, and which produce incredible noise, thus keeping you from your needed sleep.
Right.
Yeah, there were some great weapons. And here's in general, I would say the difference between the first half of the book and the second half is the second half has a story, but the first half has all these great satire moments. Whereas there's no story, you're getting a lot of character, you're getting all that stuff. You have these great satire moments and these jokes that are funny. So I think it kept me at least interested in the first half. Just reading.
And then you got the comic book, the blue cephalopod from Titan, which was great. Hold on, I'm finding that part. That part was fucking hilarious too. The blue cephalopod.
Right, just all the comic book. Although I will say he was kind of mean to comic books in general. Like
this particular title is supposed to be just a real sort of low quality product from West Africa, written by a displaced German, something, or it's just completely off.
So page 151 of the Mariner edition. I want every back issue of the blue cephalopod man from Titan rounded up. A complete file from issue 1, volume 1. He added, it's a 3D comic book. You know, the lurid kind that wiggles when you look at it? I mean, the girls wiggle, breast, pelvic area, all there is to wiggle. The monsters salivate.
Well, maybe Dick was reading a lot of Tijuana Bibles at the time. Who knows?
Yeah. And then he says, it's one of the worst, but it's not illegal. It's not outright pornographic. Like you say, the girls wiggle, but at least they don't. Go over every issue with your best engineers thoroughly. List weapons employed in all the sequences. Yeah, and so I thought that part was also hilarious. And I think
I like the one tit rule. only one tit, because then it's child friendly.
Yeah.
Right.
Two tits aren't for kids.
Breasts.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the writer; it was the artist. He was Oral Giacomici. He was a Caucasian of Italian origin who immigrated to Ghana 10 years ago. He's in and out of a mental institution in Calcutta. And not a reputable one.
Not a good one.
Yeah. Without electric shock or the malic suppressors, he would be in complete autistic, schizophrenic withdrawal. Further, he's an ex-inventor. For instance, his evolution rifle. There's one we didn't have, the evolution rifle. He actually built one about 12 years ago. And his name is Oral.
Yeah.
And then I love it. Lars says, well, Lars said presently, that's the weapon fashion designer biz for you. This shit is hilarious. To me, one of the reasons why this book worked for me completely is that even for the moments it didn't work, I was fucking laughing out loud through a lot of it. And so even if shit didn't work all the time, and maybe we should talk next about like the plowshare thing, because that is what he.
Yeah, that really confused me.
Yeah, and I know you had to look up the definition of plowshares. You didn't know that.
Well, I knew what it meant, but I was wondering if there was an alternate definition or something.
No, PKD's being Christian in that case. That's basically turn the swords into plowshares. I think there's a There's even a
that passage
statue in front of the UN showing some person basically hammering a sword into something out into a something to utilize for agriculture. That's in front of the UN.
Right.
Very.
And I think he later when he was
the way they use it is as a verb, right? It's
to plowshare a thing.
To plow.
Yeah. He's kind of inventing that aspect of it. But I think what he's trying to do too with when Klug shows up later, and I think, and I know Lampy talked about this a little bit on his podcast, is the idea that he was kind of putting some importance on toys, right? And that play is an important thing towards creating empathy, which is something that eventually the weapon turns into. But what I think Dick was trying to do with the whole plowshare thing is create this idea that when they're making all these fake weapons, they're doing all this R&D, and then they're going to end up like turning these, we'll come up with weapons so it makes it look like we're continuing the Cold War, but we'll turn these into products that you can use, and that's the kind of plowshare thing.
Yeah, which the Concomedy signs off on. That's what the Concomedies are there for. There's 6 people randomly selected as representation of the market desires of the hemisphere. And they basically look at the products and say, yeah, we like that one. Sell us that.
I do want to talk more about the Concomedy, but
on
the plowshare thing, I do like how that they're all numbered. Like, oh, you're talking about weapon 241. Yeah.
Yeah, so like you could have trading cards of all these weapons.
Yeah. He said, well, that's 202. My sketch, he stared at the object. Plowshare. This was a product for the retail market derived from the division of one Concomedy on the board. What's it do? He's talking about old Orville here. And he's like, it amuses. And he's thinking, I came up with this AI that was going to run weapon systems, and now it's
being used as a toy.
Yeah.
The pure sap, only asked 2 questions, I think his girlfriend says at one point. She's like, oh, well, you asked it some deep stuff, and it's got to go deep to get it. But usually they just use it for goofy questions.
Right.
Because they're pure saps. I found that because the culture is broken up is split between 2 types of people. You basically got your epsilons and your morons.
Yep.
It's straight out of Huxley. But his descriptions of pure saps, I just finished reading it this morning, and honestly, in the middle of all this COVID-19 craziness, too soon, Philip.
Yeah, right.
Too soon. It was like right on the money. Just right on the money for just that whole thing we're seeing in culture, where there's this this division, this proud arrogance and ignorance.
I didn't mention in the breakdown is that there's 2 classes of people, and one are people that know all the weapons and everything are fake, and then there's the common people that believe in what their government is doing.
Yeah. I've got the actual passage lined up here. Okay. It was so good. The pure sap is afraid in the back of his mind that weapons like this exist. If we didn't show them, the pure sap would believe in their existence anyhow. Mm-hmm. Right? And he'd be afraid that somehow, for reasons obscure to him, they might be used on him. Maybe he didn't pay his jet hopper license fee on time, or he cheated on his income tax, or maybe he knows deep down inside him that he's not the way God built him originally. There's Gnosticism popping up its head there for a second. Right. That in some way he doesn't quite fathom he's corrupt. Deserves item 278 turned his way, Pete said, nodding. But he's wrong, Lars said futilely. He doesn't deserve anything at all, remotely like 278 or 240 or 210, any of them. He doesn't, and they don't. He gestured at the screen. But 278 exists, Jack said. The pure sap knows it, and when he sees it used on an uglier life form than him, he thinks, hey, maybe they passed me by. Maybe because those fellas are so really bad, those peep-east bastards, 278 isn't going to get pointed at me, and I can go to my grave later on, not this year, but say 50 years from now, which means, and this is the crux, Lars, he doesn't have to worry about his own death right now. he can pretend he will never die.
Yeah. That passage.
My notes say, too real, too soon.
So insightful. It's so insightful, that passage right there.
Yeah.
That whole scene where they're watching that video.
Yeah.
And they talk about it. And like, Lars is so upset about, like, why are we doing this? Look at how disgusting it is.
Yeah.
And, the other guys are like, the people need this shit, man. They need to see that other people are worse than they are so that they can live their lives.
Yeah.
Which is basically what we do with reality television. We do that in so many ways. You're right, too real.
It's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
It's where we're at right now. This is what we're dealing this
we need the Tiger King to show us that you're better than this person. That's what we do.
So I also loved the scene when Shirley G. Fibbs becomes a concommody. I thought that
Shirley.
was... What?
Shirley.
Shirley, yeah.
Yeah, different character, David.
Shirley G. Fibbs. But I've got it here, page 17 of the Mariner edition. And it's, "Greetings," said the letter, delivered by stamped mail. "You have been selected out of millions of your friends and neighbors. You are now a concomidy." And I love that scene. I thought that was hilarious. That whole concept of the division. But one thing that I found too on
the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes.
Right.
It's a totally cheap notice. It's on cheap paper with bad perforation.
Yeah.
And that is one page before the N-bomb gets dropped, and because...
Oh, what is the... I didn't notice it. So.
I got it right here.
Page 19.
I lied. I did not get it right there.
Well, I've got it.
Sure, read it.
In detecting deadbeats, he was unmatched. He could look an applicant, especially a Negro, over less than 1 microsecond and discern the actual composition.
God damn it, Anthony. That is not the N-word.
Oh, it's kind of awkward, though.
A N-word. An awkward N-word.
An N-word, but it's not the N-word.
Sorry, Larry. N-word. I corrected it.
It is a out-of-date reference and pretty offensive the way it's in. And I know it's... Sorry, very loud motorcycle. I know it's not PKD saying this. It's a character saying this, but... Correct. But
we can't have characters saying things.
Well, no, it's fine. I'm not saying that it needs to come out, but But anyways, I will say that...
bad. You can read Huckleberry Finn.
Well, I'm not saying it had to come out, Larry. I'm not saying that. So, cool your jets. But one thing that's also on this section, though, is the first use of homeopapes in here. And I did want to talk about how all the PKD language, the homeopapes, the autofacts, they're all here. But on page 16 or 17, there's a new one I hadn't seen, which is edutapes.
Edutapes.
Oh no, we've had that one.
We've had that before.
We've had
along with autofacts
before?
and all that. Yeah.
All right, add that to the list of ones that we're going to look out for. But yeah,
He has one in there that I just can't stand. It's his shortening of instant.
Stant.
Didn't it
Stant man.
pause every time it came up? It made me pause every time it came up. It just doesn't flow.
He has some remarkably prescient stuff. Like at one point, I'm showing on page 44 of my ebook edition.
Just email. It's just
it's email. Yeah, it's email, but with an actual physical component. I don't know how they manage it, but
right.
WTKWYTI says his partner, and she says truth telling. She disagreed. WTKWYTI? No, he said. I don't want to know what my trouble is. What your trouble is, WYTI. So basically, it's it's a.
It's like a.
What do we call them now? We call those. Yeah, it's a hashtag.
Right.
You know, today I learned, or what TIL, too long didn't read. But it's like he's basically got a proto hashtag here, but it's clumsy and horrible. I don't know what to know. I don't want to know what my trouble is.
Oh, and
odd
also
stuff.
on that note, David, he also mentions like super rat traps, which we had in Dr. Blood Money, like super technologically advanced rat traps. And he also mentions what is it called? I have it written down here, but I can't read my writing. AG. Jesus Christ! It looks like cheese, but I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to be cheese.
Well, while you're looking at that, there's also a scene in this one where Lars gets in a cab and
Chemi. AG Chemi, which was a big deal in the simulacra.
Yeah, and there is a drop of the term simulacra at one point in here. And there's also a scene where he gets into a cab and basically...
I'm saying that even though you deny it, I think there is one PKD universe.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll maybe do a whole episode on that.
Maybe we'll do a whole Dick's Cosmos episode.
Yeah, PKD multiverse, maybe? But,
yeah, the Dickiverse.
Yeah.
Well, we know he reuses all the technology, and he reuses the scene where he gets the therapy session with the cab. I think I have that. Page 82. Yeah. So, yeah, the cab says, "Yes, sir, madam," which it can drive itself around, but it can't determine gender.
He uses that in every book, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's always a talking
madam.
cab. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's only 11 in the morning. Only a drunk drinks at 11 in the morning.
Thanks
like
for
the
judging
Dick
me,
man.
Car.
The judge.
Thanks for judging me, Car.
But that's the thing. He has had many times, I can't name exactly the book, but there are many times where characters get into cabs and the cabs have to tell them and tell them things. The cabs are super judgmental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cabs are very condescending in Dick's books.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a vid phone on that page. So yeah, we've definitely got all the technology covered. But in there's a null lapse train in this one, which I liked. And then
Was that 80 seconds from Boston to New York?
The fact that the Senate
Yeah.
and the Kremlin are just kind of maybe there's this thing called the Senate. I don't know, right? It's like this kind of amorphous thing where I think there's this thing called the Senate that does stuff.
Well, isn't that in history? He talks about that. Talks about an old Senate.
Yeah, I think. Hold on, let me look. Page.
Yeah, he mentions that there's two basically, the Senate and the Kremlin, like the old Soviets and the old. That's kind of, they're just sort of like figureheads now.
Yeah, page 80 of the Mariner edition. They asked who, Lars discovered, we're a mysterious, dim organization called, quote, the United States Senate. Spokesman, a transparent shade named President Nathan Schwarzkopf. Like the League of Nations, such bodies perpetuated.
By the way, I looked up Norman Schwarzkopf to see if he had a brother or something like that named Nathan.
Nathan Schwarzkopf.
Right. Though they had ceased to even be a chowder or marching society, and even in the U.S. there was an equally insubstantial entity called the Supreme Soviet, had now yelped. Okay, anyways, that's the scene. But yeah, that's really funny stuff. I don't know. I mean, I love, I think that there's a lot of really great details here and there. The alien threat is funny that they just kind of
show up.
They just take New Orleans and people are like, oh, hey, did New Orleans disappear? Right?
And Boise, Idaho.
Right.
Boise.
Of all places.
But what's funny to me about the
But
whole
San Francisco is fine. I mean, they're still doing all their things in San Francisco.
I think the aliens thing is kind of a dig at Wolheim and Ace, the fact that they're slavers, because of all the times that he had books that were do-si-do with like the slavers from Altair 6 or whatever.
Pirates.
Yeah. And so I think he was kind of making a point, like I think he was kind of jabbing at that whole like pulp sci-fi thing with the slavers from Sirius. And he obviously didn't put a lot of thought or care into the aliens. There was only one page where, I mean, it was funny, but I think it was page 178. Let me see if I can find it. But
Why are they
he
called
didn't really
sinuses?
Yeah.
Why would people from Sirius be called sinuses?
He says, Ricardo Hastings says they're from Sirius, Lilo said, and they are slavers. As we suspected, they're chitinous, and they have a physiological hierarchy dating back millions of years. On planets of their system, a little under 9 light years from here, warm-blooded life forms never evolved past lemur stage, arboreal with fox muzzles, most types nocturnal, some with prehensile tails. They don't regard us as anything but sentient freaks, just highly organized workhorse organisms that are somewhat clever manually. They admire our thumb. We can do all sorts of essential jobs. They think of us the way we do rats. But we test rats all the time. We try to learn. And that's the whole thing of like, oh, we don't want to be treated like rats, which, as an animal rights person, he is kind of dipping into animal rights little bits and pieces in these books, but especially coming up in androids. And so we're seeing it a little bit, but that's all we get on the aliens. They're barely there.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
That
funny. And I
that
like it.
and we finally beat them by going through their good sides.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the maze, is that it teaches them, it activates their ethics,
And empathy.
as it were, and they're like, yeah, maybe slavery. Not such a great idea. We'll leave now.
And if you were adapting this, I think it would be hilarious, like, to have a scene where they basically figure out, well, will they go through the maze and they're going to develop empathy? And I would love to have Lars say, like, well, how do you put that in a gun? Like,
Yeah, right.
like,
How do you
put
load
that in a
up?
gun? Like, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to turn this into a weapon? And I think...
I mean, the aliens remind me of Vogons. Sort of that Douglas Adams kind of thing where it's they totally lack any kind of empathy, but they love their own poetry.
Right. Well, I had to sit down and have a Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster with them, right? Yeah, we haven't referenced Hitchhiker's Guide here before. Like, I don't think this is... Well, I don't know. I mean, I think this book is a pure comedy, period. I think...
It's a satire. I mean, it's definitely a satire.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I think I enjoyed it so much because I was laughing. So let's talk about it in the sense of...
I think it loses a lot of the satirical edge when the story kicks in.
A little bit, yeah.
It's a satire, but it's also a little bit of a thriller, which is something that we don't really talk about that much on the show, is that a lot of Dick's books are kind of like an espionage thriller.
Yeah. Well,
not just a sci-fi book.
I mean, he's good at it. That's why he trains.
I agree. Yeah.
Right? Because he has those elements of story that are intriguing, that are like the big budget Hollywood things that people want to see. They want to see the intrigue. They want to see the action. And he does those things. But that, when you read his books, they're not primary.
Right.
They're sort of in there, but they're not the primary thing to the book.
It can be extracted later for different media.
Yeah.
As it were. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so one thing, too, we talked earlier about the...
Some kind of parade going on outside my house.
Sorry.
Yeah, who knows?
Okay.
COVID-19 related, I'm sure. We're real big boosters up here in Canada.
Oh, where
We're
are you?
parading all the time. Where am I? I'm in Victoria, BC.
Okay.
I'm on Vancouver Island, way on the far western edge of the continent.
That's why we got a Canadian again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Earlier, but we did talk earlier about the addition of the Zap Gun that happens on page 120. Lilo said, "Do you think, Lars, the two of us can do what they want? Can we come up with what they call a Zap Gun? You know, I hate to say it, a real weapon." And like, can we actually do this? That's where I think he was just like actually writing to fulfill the contract. I thought that was great. And then the one last thing before we get into like final thoughts, the one other theme that we haven't really talked much about is the time traveling vet. That there was I think the story was called War Veteran, but there was a Philip K. Dick short story that he's kind of cribbing that from, where they in the story I believe, and I read this a long time ago, but there's a vet who is sent back in time from the future to try to convince people not to go to war. And he just like hangs out on the street and he's like, "Hey, let me tell you, this fucking war is coming and it's really bad. So like, can we not do this?" Right? And it's just a short story. And I think he was kind of cribbing this idea like he does often. But I mean, it's different here.
Well, I thought that was a really cool element, is that that's all that guy did was just sit at a bench and be like, "I can tell you a story about the war," and then tell the story, and he was just waiting for someone to listen.
Yeah, he had the capacity to tell the story, but not give the information behind it.
Yeah,
so he had to wait for somebody to get triggered, basically, and say, "Wait a second, what's this guy talking about? Could this possibly be important?" Because he was constrained by the time travel tech, right, into not revealing things.
Yeah.
But he could hint and he could point and he could tell stories.
And it's also two young officers in the military that do it.
Yeah.
Which nowadays we would never have those people be the ones that listen. You know, it would never be the military guys that listen. It would always be some probably hippie-ish person that would be like, "Oh man, I totally understand what you're saying." That kind of thing. But when you're looking at the mid-'60s and Vietnam and early times in the war, when we were still the undefeated America, like soldiers really were the ones that we trusted.
Yeah.
Well, he in this scene too. He says on it's on the 159 of the Mariner edition. "Let me tell you how we beat him in the big war," the old vet wheezed. Tickled to have an audience. "It was a long war. Shoot." It seemed like it would never end. And then he goes on down the line later on. He says, "Those weapon designers don't know a thing, stupid bastards." And then he calls them slavers from Sinus, and which is hilarious. I wasn't sure if I read this right when I was going through it, because sometimes, you know, I'm not sure, but is he suggesting in here that there is a timeline before he came back where they created a weapon to send them into the future? Like,
I don't think so.
Yeah, he's just...
I don't think so. I think it's all false.
Right.
Everything he says is false because he can't tell the truth.
Right.
So it has to be a made-up story
about them sending the slavers.
Yeah.
Which was a neat part where he was talking
but
about...
it has sort of a truth to it.
It's a true lie. It's a true lie. It's a story that tells the truth about it without actually telling what actually happened.
Yeah.
It's a true lie.
and that's fairly brilliant, you know, unto itself. Is that, you know, how to lie and tell the truth at the same time is kind of a hard thing to do.
It's called fiction. It's called fiction, man.
Well, in a general sense, yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I don't know. Those are just. It's just another element of the PKD thing that I think is really cool about like where this novel's coming from.
I will say, David, that one of the things that I don't like about this, maybe I do, maybe I don't, I don't know, is that this is kind of like one of the only PKD books where I feel like he had enough freedom to be as pedantic as he wanted, like with the German and with the medical terms and with the Latin and doing all these things, but and sometimes it works and other times he just sounds pretentious. I rolled my eyes plenty of times during the reading of this book. You know, when he's got like 4 sentences in German and I'm like, yeah, all right.
Dick loves him some German though, Larry. I think we know
Right.
at this point. Yeah.
It's like the when you're reading Lord of the Rings and it comes to a song or a poem, you're just like, fine, great, I'm not going to read this. And you just move on. You know,
just skip that part, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one of my problems with, like, for example, well, like Joe Hill, who I think is a verbose overwriter, right? Like, I generally like his stories, and I like Joe Hill in general.
Sure.
But there are times where, like, I know exactly what's going to happen for the next page and a half. And it's not advancing the story, it's just details. And his dad does that too. And there's just times where I'm just like, skip.
Yep.
You know, like, skip.
Yep.
And if you've read enough Stephen King, you know when to skip, right?
Right. Yeah.
And like it's fine. I'm sure some people enjoy that, but you know I don't know. I mean, I read PKD slower because I'm reading it for the podcast, but this book I definitely slowed down to pay attention to details, and I don't necessarily do that for everyone. I do that when I read for the podcast, but whatever. Anyways. So, any other last themes that maybe one of you folks thinks I've missed, but I think...
just in the structure alone, I feel like he's grown in telling different stories again. Like, he started doing this, obviously, from the beginning and doing it poorly from the beginning. But he's gotten so much better at separating story elements and creating scenes with characters outside of his main antagonist that matter and tell different parts that are necessary for the story to work. So, I mean, he's grown as a writer in this book, I think.
I would agree, because this is a book that, although I find the first 60 pages or so kind of irrelevant, it doesn't feel piecemeal like a lot of his other books do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And it's interesting to really think about this in the context that he was writing it at the same time as Penultimate Truth, and this was really like 2 Cold War books that, like, and I don't really know how much the Zap Gun, like, if you don't understand, if you don't have like a basics of what the Cold War was like or what the time, you really have to think about this book in the context of when it was written and when it came out.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think to really fully master the themes. And you know, it's funny because Scott said, like, oh, this is too close to home with some aspects of it, and the time that, because we're living in such an intense like moment, right? It's funny because so much of the science fiction I've been reading since this quarantine started, it all, like, there's all, like that China Mountain Zhang, for example, that just really hit home with the Second Depression and the Chinese century. And I read Deus Ex by Norman Spinrad, which was about, you know, it's similar to Upload. It's about digitizing yourself, but it was also about, you know, how are we going to live in isolation and how can we live that way?
Right.
And it's funny to look at this book and then think about like these intense times that we're living in, but this book was written in an intense time with that nuclear threat and what was happening with the Cuban Missile Crisis and like how close people thought that they were to seeing it all go.
in
Yeah.
Vietnam, and
Totally.
there's a lot going on.
Yeah. So I think that
I mean, this is one of the most volatile times in American history is the 1960s.
yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense that it would have all those elements, and as intensely as they are in this.
All
Can
right,
se-
so,
Sorry, you were asking for final thoughts, or?
Well, no. I can start that.
Yeah,
Just if there's any other themes that maybe we missed, and then
Oh, I just love the conceptual, the idea of moving into basically a psychic or spiritual, higher dimensional space in order to pull out material. Because for me, that's just it correlates to the writing process. This is all we do,
Mm-hmm.
right? We just go into our
that was
imagination and
Thursday.
pull. Well, for Dick, that was Thursday. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And it would just you go in, and I've always felt as a writer, and this will shift over time with my my life as a writer, is that I always feel as if I'm not so much making it up as pulling it from somewhere else. The whole channeling aspect of writing. So reading his take on the fashion weapon designers, chef's kiss. It was just really nice.
But you don't feel frustrated that they weren't actually doing what they say?
It's the process itself. So what if it doesn't work? I mean, how many times do you sit down to write something and it comes out and it's crap
All the time.
all the time?
well, and they are designing these things to a degree. Like they're making sketches, whether they subconsciously got it from reading a comic book or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's where it gets interesting as well. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Can I just?
As a stagehand, as a carpenter, as a welder, as a working person, I can say, the other characters, what's his face, the Pete Freed.
Yeah. The technicians and the engineers.
All this shit come to life was pretty fucking cool as well. He's getting this vague sketch, and they say several times, like, if you want something built, you go to this one guy, because he can turn your little chicken scratch kid's drawing into a real thing. And I thought that was also cool.
I would have liked to have seen more of Dick describe how, what that space is, that kind of trans-dimensional space, because we just get a blackout.
He really didn't do it.
Grant Morrison in his comic series, The Filth, he runs a similar little operation where some of the characters descend into 2D comic book space so as to harvest impossible machines and technologies.
Oh, really?
From this place that's just pure imagination. So you drop down into 2D, you enter into the comic book, you interact with the superheroes, maybe kill a few on your way out. Either way, you come out with a cool new gun, right? And they fold back up into 3D space.
And
it's like, check out what I got here. This shouldn't be.
What is it called?
The Filth.
All right.
And that's one of Grant Morrison's lesser-known titles, right?
It is, but it's very PKD. It's
I have a copy of it.
Satire.
Yeah, I have a copy of it in my TBR, but I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Do it.
Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do that today when we're done.
I love Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
I love his writing. So.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to start our final thoughts by saying that I'm going to give the Zap Gun 5 out of 5 issues of the Blue Cephalopod from Titan.
Wow.
Yes, there's some faults and some problems, but to me those are minor compared to the fun that I got out of it. And I think that his use of thematic political allegory is super on point in this book. And if I laugh that much and I think that much about a theme, that's thumbs up for me. And I know that's a very, very high rate, but I really enjoyed the book. So, I haven't given a 5 in a long time.
Huh?
Not since Three Stigmata.
Three Stigmata is a fucking masterpiece, though. So.
We know you like Three Stigmata, okay?
I love Three Stigmata.
But that's my first 5 out of 5 since Three Stigmata. So.
Wow.
Who wants to go next?
I'll go. I'd say I'd give it like a 3.5 or 4 out of 5. Just again, the amusement levels were huge. Concepts were very cool to think about. And once the story got going, it was it was an interesting one. I dug it. I dug it a lot.
Yeah.
Is that your review, Larry? Yep.
Anthony?
Yep.
Anthony?
I'm gonna give it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it 3.5 bottles of a mixture of mescaline, psilocybin, psilocybe mexicana, stropharia, cubensis D, lysergic acid, diethylamide.
Can you just say Godflesh and just shorten it? It's the Godflesh.
Yeah.
It's the Teonoctal or whatever they call it down south.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, 3.5. I really like the middle of this book. From when he meets Lilo Topchev to the end where it kind of ends like Clue. Do you guys remember the end of the Clue movie where he's like, now I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife. And then it freeze frames. Like, it kind of ends like that, where he picks her up in his arms and then he kicks the door open. And I was like, oh, the book's over. But then there were 25 more pages.
Yeah.
So I really like the middle of this book quite a bit. And I think it is a step up for Dick, where he's not just putting all the disparate narratives into one book like we've seen with The World Jones Made or Dr. Futurity or even Dr. Blood Money, which I know is a fan favorite, but I really didn't like. So
There's a
yeah,
bunch of those.
yeah, about 3.5 stars from me.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is in the World Jones Made or The Man Who Japed camp. Is very similar to those books.
I actually think The Man Who Japed is better in terms of I found it more interesting and funny. But at the same time, I will out myself. I think maybe the fact that I don't have an in-depth knowledge of the Cold War, and obviously I was born in 1986, so maybe my experience with it is obviously pretty much, non-existent for myself. Yeah. Like, I think maybe that lessened my understanding and ability to enjoy it as a satire.
Sure.
So I figured I'd just out myself now about that. So.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, but I definitely, I don't know. I mean, the satire aspects of it are so much of a part of it that if you're not feeling that, it may not
work at all.
Work. Yeah. Larry.
All right.
He gave his review. He said, "Yep."
Yep.
So I'm gonna give it 3 old Orvals because it's look, it works for me. I like the opening satire. I like the jokes. I like the story's okay when it gets to it. But those last 25 pages kind of take at least 1 star off. 1 star off. The whole fucking Feb story doesn't belong. It's pad. It's good pad, but it's still just fucking padding. It reminded me of what's his face, the not Stephen King guy.
Joe Hill? What do you mean by not Stephen King guy?
Dean Koontz?
Dean Koontz?
Yeah, Dean
Yeah.
Koontz.
Dean.
Like
Hey,
early
Phantoms
Dean
is a good book, Larry.
Early Dean Koontz always had a character, like a story that did not have anything to do with the main characters, like or just one little tiny crossover, and that's what this was. It's just padding, and it pissed me off. And also, like you just said, with all the rattling off of names and the fucking Latin and the German, and it's funny sometimes, and I roll my eyes other times. Yeah,
the German always feels kind of displaced for me.
Kugelmani or whatever. Like, I looked up the words he used; they don't exist. It's more of his wacky non-science bullshit.
Well, hold on, because we didn't get to this. I didn't get to bring this up, but I'm going to do it now that you're talking about that. There's a page on page 21. He says, "Good God, Febs, you're completely right. This stage 1 of the Brownian movement restriction field induction coil portable subtype can be easily plowed shared into an inexpensive source to chill beer on excursions lasting over 7 hours. Whoo, golly!"
Hey, there's also a scene where somebody
So
comes
much
along.
wackadoo science.
I know.
I just want to say, too, that there is a scene where somebody calls Lars a forked radish for no reason.
Forked radish.
Actually, that's Old Orville.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And he's quoting Willie Shakespeare.
Yeah.
That's
Or
true.
or kind of misquoting him.
Yeah.
Well, and by the way, I did forget to quote the Kim Stanley Robinson. They're not that great at quotes. They're just two short ones. He didn't say much about Zap Gun. But
While David does that, I'm going to hit the restroom real quick. I'll be right back.
Sure. Go for it.
well, yeah, so if people are interested, the Kim Stanley Robinson quotes are, "This is a fictional world with much potential for satire. It is similar in this respect to the novels described in the previous chapter." This is a book, obviously. "Since the original novella was written no later than the middle of 1965, this similarity is not surprising. The novella was 67,000 words long, and the novel cannot be much more than 90,000 words long, so the two versions are not that different. Yet, the Zap Gun remains no more than a weak cousin of the novels discussed in the previous chapter." That's the penultimate truth, the Dr. Blood Monies. That's what he's talking about. And Three Stigmata.
Huh.
Recapitulating a thinner narrative than what he's already accomplished. And then he says, "The Zap Gun is a two-character network and a subplot added to bring the work to novel length. From the 5 point of view characters of the Man in the High Castle or the 9 of the Simulacra." 9. There's 70 characters in the Simulacra. We're talking about 9. "We are down here to 2, and the novel is lessened accordingly. The Zap Gun is a clear symptom of the loss of creative energy Dick was experiencing at the time. The basic premise is one that might have supported a strong novel, but the treatment is perfunctory, and the premise is no more than sketched out." Ouch. Kim Stanley Robinson was not a fan of the Zap Gun and thinks that it suffers from only having 2 characters. So,
Well,
I like his use of the term "sketched out"
yeah.
in relation to the actual activity of the psychics in the novel.
Well, he's actually right. There are only really 2, maybe 3 characters that are fully
on the Simulacra. There's more than 9 characters in the Simulacra. There's like 75.
Well, I think what he means is fully fleshed out.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, in the Zap Gun, we could spend a little more time with more interesting characters. I think Klug would have definitely been a better character to explore a little bit.
Yeah, he was.
Considering he creates the device that saves the day anyway.
He's the goddamn hero.
Yeah.
All right.
But, also, David,
Yes.
specifically, as a satire, I don't think this is like the greatest satire ever done or anything like that. It's
No.
really, it suffers from a little bit too much on the nose, too much doing the generic satire thing. It's almost parody. Like the difference between satire and parody is one has an agenda, the other is just for laughs. And I feel like it really straddles that line.
Yeah. Well, I can see where I definitely am not arguing with, I'm not going to go to the mat for the Zap Gun, but...
Really? You gave it 5 fucking stars. Why wouldn't you go to the mat?
Well, no, I mean, I liked it. But
Just walk away, David.
What I'm saying is, I'm not going to tell somebody they're wrong about their feelings of the Zap Gun. If somebody told me that Three Stigmata is a piece of shit, I'm gonna be like, whoa, you're wrong, and I'm gonna argue.
Dude, we'd have to Hardy Boys that one and tap in and tap out.
I mean, Anthony telling me that Man in the High Castle is boring shit is gonna piss me off and gonna get me going.
I said it. I said it, and I stand by it.
Yeah,
that's bullshit, and I hate it. But with Zap Gun, if he tells me he doesn't like it, I'm just be like, oh, well, it worked for me, and I liked it. It's a difference. A little bit like you guys drove me crazy hating on Martian Time Slip. make most of my hair out. But see, there,
David, I don't want to. I know this is shocking to you, but it's okay for people to like different things.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. But
yeah.
I'm fine with that with Zap Gun. It's a 5-star book for me, but I'm not worried about people not liking it. What I'm saying is there's certain...
I'm more the one that doesn't like people liking different things.
Yeah, you get pissed off about us liking Tarantino.
Sorry, Scott. Bit of a group fight here.
I can tell. It's fine. Carry on, boys. Carry on.
We've been doing this a long time now. But yeah, so we should move on.
How dare you like things I don't like?
Huh?
Well, moving on. Adaptation time.
How would we do this as a movie? Does anybody want to go first? How would we adapt this movie, comic book, or whatever? How would you adapt this to another medium?
I don't think this one's too hard, is it?
I'd ask for Taika Waititi as the director.
Of course. Who wouldn't?
Yeah,
I think that would work really well.
Or Edgar
I agree.
Wright.
Or Edgar Wright, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is basically a comedy.
I did not think of that.
Or
I'd actually go with the Coen brothers, David.
Yeah, the Coen brothers, like Hudsucker Proxy type.
I think, yeah, and I just watched Hail Caesar recently, and I think they could do really cool stuff with kind of more the espionage aspects, but also still be funny. So that would be my pick.
So who's your Lars Powder guy?
I like Hail Caesar. How about you?
What, Larry?
I liked Hail Caesar.
I liked it. It's kind of like Burn After Reading, where it has a nothing ending, but I think that was the point.
Well, that's part of that same trilogy, quadology, whatever you want to call it. It's called their Idiot series.
I actually think I might put, going off the Coen brothers, I would probably put John Malkovich in the Lars Powder Dry role.
Whoa!
See, I was thinking full wacky Nicolas Cage. For
Paul Giamatti is Klug, though.
Yeah,
bringing it back.
Giamatti is Klug. Yeah. And he is a serious dickhead, by the way. Like, I'm pretty sure he did paycheck for free.
We don't disbelieve you.
Yeah.
We'll know we've made it when he comes on to do an episode.
Yeah, right.
Well, Paul Giamatti wanted to play Philip K. Dick in a movie. He was trying to do a biopic for a while, and he wanted to play him. Yeah.
Interesting.
That was like 15 years ago, so it obviously didn't happen. I would definitely focus on the comedy aspects, make it funny. Like I said,
how do you sell that future or that reality that we're in? I mean, that's where the Earth is split into hemispheres, and
you know how I would do that is I would focus on Leo and Lars as your main characters. I would cast Nicolas Cage as Lars and Kate Blanchett as Lilo. And I know like the
Kate Blanchett's not 18.
I'm changing. I'm not being faithful here, but well, there was a part where they thought that Lilo was like super old and being.
Oh, she could have been old and decayed and all that. Yeah, there's that.
So Tilda Swinton, David, probably be better for the part.
Yeah, Tilda Swinton would be better.
Well, that's your fucking movie, but mine, Kate Blanchett. But
your 5-star movie.
Yeah, it would definitely be. But I would focus on their characters as like doing the world building through them.
Yeah, you could go back and forth.
Yeah, until they come together and kind of ramp up their competition.
Sure.
Early on, and kind of make more of a comedy of the fact that like they hate each other's weapons. And it's
get rid of all that like insecure bullshit. Make it like they're
a little bit more of a moonlighting thing. That Lilo and Lars fucking hate each other.
Jobs, they're like gung ho about it. You know, I do this thing.
And then she would probably make fun of his trances, and she would have some kind of like technological setup, maybe that they put nodes to her head. He's doing drugs and she's like doing technology. and then
when you
have it
really
be like kind of an
you
arms
find out
race, and
that
then
they're full of shit. You don't find out they're full of shit until like there's this real threat, and then they get together.
Slater show up, and I would make them fucking hilarious, and I'd see more of them a little bit.
Like the Vogons.
Yeah, like Vogons. And then, that's how I would do that movie, and it would be
Oh,
awesome.
not bad. Not bad. I like it.
I think it could be a better movie than a book because I think it'd be more focused. I think if you like define the focus and do that, you could make a superior movie to what you've got. So
Listen up, Hollywood.
We've kind of done final thoughts. Scott, I really appreciate you showing up. I have a lot of love in my heart for Victoria. I lived for a year across the water in Port Angeles.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can see that. I can literally see that from my house.
Right. Well, we were trying to move to Victoria, but Canada said fuck no. And,
yeah, we tend to. Well, apparently our immigration is not as open as I thought it was.
Yeah, good friends in Victoria, including Desmond Reddick from Dread Media, a friend of the podcast. So.
Oh, yeah.
And
cool. Well, thanks very much for having me, by the way.
Oh, yeah, we really appreciate it. Well, Anthony, next up is the...
I was not prepared for this.
I have Counterclock World on my shelf right here. If you
is it
go for it?
Yeah, it's Counterclock next.
Go for it, David.
All right, hold on a second. Next up is the Counterclock World. And on the back cover it says, in Counterclock World, time has begun moving backwards. People greet each other with goodbye, blow smoke into cigarettes, and rise from the dead. When one of the rising dead is famous and powerful prophet, Anarch Peak. Wow, that's a Anarch Peak. A number of groups start a mad scramble to find him first, but their motives are not exactly benevolent because Anarch Peak may just be more dead than alive, and these groups will do whatever they must to send him back to the grave. What would you do if long dead relatives started coming back? Would you take care of them? I think so. But what if they preferred being dead? In Counterclock World, one of Dick's most theological and philosophical works, these troubling questions are addressed. Though, as always, you may have to figure out the answers yourself. So, Counterclock World, I've never read this one. I'm excited to read it. It sounds like it's pretty good. And where the fuck did Larry go?
I don't know. But I'm pretty sure the book won't be as cool as that synopsis, as those Mariner editions lie to me every time.
I don't know.
Who got shot in the head? What assassin?
Yeah, right. Yeah. World Jones made all over again.
We did talk about the Counterclock World in our interview with Craig Callender, the expert on time. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that interview, he did talk about Counterclock World, and I just kind of nodded because I hadn't read it yet. So, but I'm excited about this one, and I have a cool special guest planned who I'm not going to tell you who it is because I'm afraid I fall through. But if all works out, we should have another special guest. Thank you, Scott, for showing up and representing the great country of Canada.
Thank you, eh?
Yeah, thanks, man.
We did
Most
get
welcome.
a gain.
You're most welcome.
And, I appreciate that. I have Canadian relatives, and I always remember that my stepbrother spent time in Canada growing up, and his father was Canadian, so he says Canadian agains. And, and he didn't even grow up there. So, it's funny. All right.
That's how it works.
Dickheads, thanks for listening this far in. We're 2 hours in. This is the second 2-hour episode in a row.
Keep yourself paranoid.
Stay paranoid. Keep it paranoid.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.